Hey strong people, Beck here from StartingStrongman.com, and today I'm going to talk about if the elephant bar is bullshit. If you hate watching and listening to me talk about this, click the link to the article below on barbend.com to read what I said. So, Rogue Fitness announced that they're putting up $50,000 to any competitor or competitors who can deadlift 500.5 kilos or more at the upcoming Arnold Strongman Classic, which is just like 10 or 11 days away. Crazy. This is a clear aim at Eddie Hall's July 9th, 2016 Strongman deadlift record of 500 kilograms slash 1,102 pounds that he did in Leeds. It sparked a lot of debate with fans, you guys. Even Eddie Hall himself put up a video on YouTube dismissing the validity of a lift on that bar before it's even happened. We're preemptively calling bullshit. So why the controversy? The bar being used is a special bar made by Rogue Fitness exclusively for the Arnold Strongman Classic, coined the Elephant Bar. Debuted at the Arnold in March of 2016, the Elephant Bar is longer than a traditional barbell and uses the CNC, they're beautiful plates, but they're deep, 2 inches thick versus a standard, a calibrated powerlifting plate. Of course, these are also calibrated, they're CNC machined to be, exact weight, but they're thinner, so they don't go all the way out on the sleeves as much. So this extra width and the extra length of the bar and the extra width of the plates is going to cause more deflection, or as we call bend or whip. There's actually an article, which I will try to remember to link below as well, up on Starting Strongman called, or you can Google it, The Science of Strongman, the Curious Case of the Bumper Plate PR. And this might be something you're accustomed to. If you lift on a normal, weightlifting bar, normal 2-inch, power bar with iron plates, and let's say, your max around 500, and 500 is hard, and then another day you put 505, you fill it up to the end with those thick rubber bumper plates, and it was easier. Put the weight further out, the bar is going to bend more, it's going to deflect, and it's going to, you're not going to lift all of the weight at once because those outside plates are still touching while the bar is still bending. And the same thing happens with the Elephant Bar, just to a very larger degree than a 500 plate bumper plate PR. So with it being a custom bar that bends more and is potentially easier, should it count as the highest strongman deadlift of all time if someone does manage the feat? I see a lot of people spouting all sorts of reasons why it shouldn't online, and I'm going to mention a few on why it should and will. You may not agree with me, but this is my take. So let's talk about the deadlift progression in the world of strongman. The first time I remember that they counted a strongman deadlift as a world record exclusively to itself was 2008 at the Viking Power Challenge. I believe that was in Norway, where Kevin Nee pulled 410 kilos, which is just over 900 pounds, and he was using a power bar and calibrated plates. After that, there was the first time they ever talked about it was Giants Live in London. Colin Bryce put out an article by Iron Mind, hyping the event that they were going to try to break a new record there. This was the first time where you saw hey, we're breaking records, and it was that was at the start of the show. This was before the Deadlift World Championships. Before that, records they would happen. But this is a clear, the promoters trying to hype their event to try to sell tickets in London. There wasn't huge crowds like there is today in 2011. And it ended with Brian Shaw and Lawrence Chalet both hitting 430 kilos for a new strongman deadlift record. After that, there was a max deadlift that same year at World's Strongest Man, where Zydrunas Savickas pulled 442 kilos, which was on, they had this setup, they used an Ironmind SQ bar, which doesn't bend, and is actually, I've heard reports that it's not even a full 9 inches. It's about 8.5 or 8 inches. So it's actually it's about a 1 inch deficit. And they have those big, what do you call them? They're like those big black barrels, if you remember at Worlds. And that was the new world record of 442 kilos. 2 years later, in 2013, Brian Shaw hit 442.5 to break that on the same setup. Iron Mind S Cube power bar, very stiff, not much bend with the barrels. Then Benedict Magnusson in 2014 pulled 445 kilos at Giants Live Australia. This is before those events were considered Arnold's. It was called FitX. It was still Fitness Expo. That kind of morphed into the Arnold Australia, I believe, and that was on a deadlift bar. Then at the first deadlift championships, I think that was 2015, Benedict Magnusson pulled 461 for a new record, and that was a new all-time record for, it beat his powerlifting record as well. This is the first time that a strongman deadlift with straps and hitch allowed and everything beat a powerlifting, just with no straps in a, sanctioned powerlifting meet. Benedict's, that pull was by a kind of funny promoter, the famous 1015 he did, the 460, but that's a whole other story and a whole other video. And then, if you have ever watched the Eddie Hall documentary, Eddie Hall Strongman, great documentary, you will know that he dropped the bar at lockout, missed his record attempt, then went and pulled 462 kilos at the Arnold Australia about a week after competing in the Arnold Classic in Ohio, and he used a deadlift bar there. Then 2015, he breaks it by another kilo, 463. Same setup, deadlift bar, calibrated powerlifting plates at the deadlift championships. Then at the Arnold Strongman Classic, 2016, the elephant bar was introduced, and Eddie Hall pulled 465. Colin Bryce was announced. There's a lot. This is kind of right before they started the Arnold Strongman World Series, and Colin Bryce, a lot of the people in Giants Live were somewhat getting involved. That didn't end up panning, and now they're competitors. This is my take on how all that happened. So at the time, it was all announced that was a record, a world record. It beat the previous record, done at the Arnold Australia, which Colin was also at. So there was the 2015-16. There's kind of a merge between Giants and the Arnold's promotions, and that kind of went away. Then later it was discounted, and when there was the lead up for the 2016 deadlift championships, I think it was July, they were counting the 463 as the record to break. So they went from counting it to then not. So why should an elephant bar count again? Of course, he pulled 500 kilos in the 2016 deadlift championships. Traditionally, strongman has never had a standard bar or plates to establish its deadlift record, showing there's lots of variation in what I just went. In the past, both counts as long as the bar is from a standard height. As Colin Bryce stated in an article from 2001 in Iron Mind, strongman rules, explained Bryce, means that it is a normal height bar, but straps and hitching are allowed. And you can, you can see the link to that in the Barbend article that's going to go up, or maybe I'll remember to put in the description below to that full article. Zydrunas Savickas formerly set the strongman deadlift record on this setup, which is with the elephant. I mean, with the barrels, and that's way not standard compared to plates and everything. An elephant bar, as I mentioned, deadlift record counted in 2016 for a brief minute. The elephant bar debuted in 2016. Eddie Hall won the event with 465 kilos / 1025 pound deadlift, which was announced on stage by Colin Bryce as a new world record, breaking Eddie's previous record of 463 kilos / 1023 pounds. Eddie Hall didn't use a standard bar and used more equipment. I think when he, at the deadlift championships, I think this is a big misnomer. I see everyone saying he used a power bar. did not use a power bar. He used a deadlift bar. The 500 kilogram deadlift Eddie Hall hit was done on a deadlift bar, which is also longer and bends more than a standard power bar. I haven't been around long enough to know, but I really wonder if people made the same stink when the deadlift bar was made, and if it was seen as cheating back then. You could say the elephant bar is just more of an evolution of the deadlift bar. It's got longer and bendier. A deadlift bar, I have one. It sits on my rack right under my power bar, and it's a little longer. I don't remember the exact specs, but I think it's 7.5 feet, and the power bar is 7. Also, figure 8 straps and a deadlift suit were allowed at the Deadlift World Championships. Neither is allowed at the Arnold. With the figure 8 straps, especially Eddie's a master at this, and people should too. You can hold the bar on your fingertip and not fully grip the bar, where with straps you have to wrap around the bar, you have to hold the bar firm. So think about this versus this. You're getting that much range of motion. Not a lot, but we're talking about how much a bar bends. That's taking an inch probably off a range of motion, depending on how long your fingers are and how good you are at that cheat. A deadlift, you also use a deadlift suit. Myself personally, I get 50 to 60 pounds out of a deadlift suit in the past, and I probably get about 40 to 50 pounds off a deadlift bar versus stiff bar as well, knowing how to use it. So, some of the competitors at the Arnold are at disadvantage that they don't get to use a suit or figure 8 straps. When allowed, almost all of them do use those two things. Eddie Hall said it was a hard pull. So funny story, in 2016 at the Arnold, I actually covered that event for Flow Elite. I was a reporter and interviewed a lot of the athletes. I don't know what Flow Elite did with the footage. I really wish I had some of this, but I had interviews with Halfdoor, Eddie Hall, right after he pulled that bar, and I'm paraphrasing, so I don't want to quote, but how I remember he told me is I interviewed him in between bites of his peanut butter and honey sandwich. I actually said, hey, Eddie, anytime you have, whenever you're done eating, he said, I'm never going to be done eating, so just interview me now. Classic Eddie. So in between bites of his peanut butter and honey, might have been jelly, sandwich, he told me, that bar's, he kind of hated the bar, was my understanding. And it was hard and vibrated in his hands because if you remember, it shook him all over the place. He was fast off the floor. He's a different style puller. Once it got to his knees and he's trying to lock out, the bend started to whip and go up and down, and it was oscillating, and it was actually vibrating in his hands. That's insane. So it was really hard to control the lockout. For other lifters, it might be easier. But I asked, I'm like, oh, so you think it was harder than a normal deadlift bar like I have in my gym, and I'm sure he has in his. And he said, yeah. And I said, what could you do if that today? How much would have you hit if it was a regular power bar? And how I remember him saying is that he would have hit another 20 to 30 kilos, and he did a couple months later. So I don't think he was lying. So should it count? That's going to be subjective. But Eddie Hall's deadlift, of 500 kilogram was recognized in the Guinness Book of World Records as a world record. I saw mention that the Guinness will be recognizing some of the records, if not all, at the Arnold in their rules and athlete briefing, which I was sent. I did a previous video on that. You can find it on my channel. So it'll be interesting if they will recognize this one or if it will be a separate bar. Maybe that will be the decider. But I'm just pointing out some of the hypocrisy on different things and some of the different things, because there's no real standard in strongman, and records are kind of stupid in the first place. They're amazing. At the end of the day, I think it's easier for some, especially like Brian Shaw and Hafthor Bjornsson, that they have a similar bar to train on and they've gotten accustomed to it. They're taller, they're wider. I think a deadlift bar almost cramps them up, and the elephant bar kind of suits them better. Hafthor even said you have to pull it slowly off the floor. You have to get all the slack out. You can't just rip it, because then it'll throw you forward. You see it throw people forward. And I've talked to normal strongmen, not pros that live in Ohio that have pulled on it, and they said if you try to yank it, you get pulled forward, and you can watch and you can see that happen. So in a way, it's harder. It's just a different test. Is it so different that it shouldn't count as a new world record if it happens? I mean, we're talking about something that hasn't even happened yet. That's going to be subjective, but if we go by the initial rules that were set in 2011, standard height, doesn't matter how you lock it out, that's a record. Tell me what you think. I'm Kalle Beck. Thanks for watching. You can follow me at LetKaleLift. Follow at Starting Strongman as well. If you want to get into the sport of strongman or you want to excel, go to startingstrongman.com for all of your news, tips, and articles, and store.startingstrongman.com for figure 8 straps so you can cheat below and get a little extra inch out of there.